When I was around 14, my family and I moved into an old house in Iowa City, Iowa. It was at least 70 years old, but was still in pretty good condition for a house that old. I got the couch for about a month as my dad had found mold in the room I would originally be staying in, so we had to get that cleared up. My parents are both nurses and worked long hours of the week, which meant that I'd be home for most of the time. I didn't mind staying home, as I like to think of myself as mature when it came to that. One morning, my parents had told me they'd be working overnight to help with the hospital. This was around the time where COVID cases were rising, so the hospital needed as much assistance they could get. That evening, I had gotten off the bus and opened the door to my house to see a man I had never seen before sitting on the couch with a gun. Before I could even get the chance to scream, he points the gun at me and puts his finger to his lips. My 14-year-old self just stood there, not knowing what to do until he said something. In a low, raspy voice, he had asked where my parents keep all of their jewelry. Stuttering my words, I told him in my mom's room beside her nightstand. He nodded his head and told me to stay there until he got back and not to move for any reason. At this point, my fight or flight mode was at its peak and I made a mad dash for the door. I then heard him yell out aloud, "Hey," from the other room, but I didn't care. My life was on the line. I sprinted toward the trees beside my house and hid there until he was gone. He runs out of my house, scanning the tree line for me, and prayed to God that he wouldn't find me. Sooner or later, he seemed to have given up and grabbed his bike from my driveway and rode off. At that point, I ran back into my house and called 911 as I knew there was a slim chance my parents would pick up. It didn't take long for police to arrive and make an arrest. As it turns out, police had found him about a block away breaking into another house. The unfortunate part was that a girl who was a year older than me was home alone taking a shower when he had broke in. He had apparently found her, but police and my parents refused to reveal as to what happened after. Till this day, I'm still shocked and appalled by what happened, and I hope I never see him again.
When I was younger, I met a man. He was my brother's friend, and he started living with us after his parents had done some crazy things. And he was left practically alone and still a minor attending school, though I can't remember if he was supposed to be under someone else's care. I was an annoying little sister then, 7 years younger, but I remember him saying to my brother, "I don't mind at all, she reminds me of mine." What really gets me about this story, this experience, was that I somehow didn't realize until about a month ago how important these events to transpire just might be. For me, there's only two events that are unmistakably him, things that he did to me. First, being one night when I was coming down for a glass of water. I began by opening my heavy bedroom door and continued down the creaky hallway and stairs without being at all silent. Just as I got to the bottom platform, I saw him sitting at the computer. I looked at him, he looked at me, and I heard an old news report playing of the arrest of his parents. I felt like I was invading his most private moment, a time where he was obviously emotional and raw, and I felt horrible. I paused in that moment because it was such an awkward situation. I just wasn't sure how I was supposed to respond next. But in that moment where I was in my own head, he must have closed the tab and reopened another. He had to have hit play, as I imagined it wouldn't have started on its own, and I heard moaning. He just stared at me, and I'm now even deeper in my own head like, is this happening? It must have been an accident. and I finally got the sense in me to go back to my room. I don't remember if I ever told anyone at the time. I dismissed it as an accident. The second one happened just as I got out of school. I went up to my room to find my bubble back TV was missing. My brother took it all the time, either as his own perceived punishment or because he wanted to use it for whatever reason. So I started by storming into his room and demanding where it was. The prong in my screw-on cable cord was getting bad, and it was such a hassle to set up again and again, I was aggravated. He tells me he has no idea and he could care less. So confused, I'm now wondering who else would have taken it. I'm not grounded, my brother doesn't have it. Could it be his friend? I go to his room and I knock. He sounds pissy and I asked if he took it. Through the door he said he did, and going back to my aggravated state, I opened it up to see it sitting on the ground, seemingly unused. I then angrily say, "Why did you take my TV?" And before I knew it, he bum-rushed me into a wall and lifts me higher just a little bit by my throat. I start yelling at him, yelling in general, trying to fight back, and my mom runs up the stairs and screams at him. She tells him to let go of me and to get the hell out, as my brother comes out of his room with the most puzzled look on his face like, "What are you doing?" His friend then leaves and I can't remember him coming back and living with us after that. A while later, my brother moved to his new house in the same neighborhood, and for years he would go on and off allowing that friend to stay with him. He felt bad for him, though he was given an unfair start in life and wanted to help him. It was before or around this time a man all in black was beginning to terrorize me. I've written a story about that one on here before, so you're going to possibly recognize it. But it all started on All Hallows Eve when I was in 5th grade. It's exhausting to go through all of this again, truthfully. It was something that apparently my mind tried to downplay, dismiss, and forget for a while. But recently, in therapy, I was forced to really face it, to realize it was the origin of who I am today. So, I'm going to try to briefly explain what happened without leaving too many details out. There was a knock on my door while I was home alone. It was in the middle of the night, and I grew up watching Forensic Files, Law & Order SVU, etc. So I was just naturally like, yeah, I don't want to open this. But like all the dumb characters in horror movies who die in the beginning, I did. I opened the door and no one was there. So I stepped out onto the porch to look and see if they were leaving. Because of the moment I had taken to decide, but there was no one there. At first I thought nothing of it, one of my brother's friends or something. But sometime later I was sitting on the couch, and from there I saw something dark flash past the kitchen window. It was quick, but I kept thinking, it's probably just my brother or his friends playing a prank, or maybe it's nothing. I had no idea, but I was definitely creeped out. As I sat there, I had this feeling of being watched, like my senses were telling me something was off. But that didn't prepare me for when I looked up again. And amidst the slight of a glow of the backyard, I saw the outline of a man in black standing in the window. In the case of fight or flight, freeze or fawn, I froze. It was when I watched as he slightly knocked on the window and did a closed finger wave like you would to a child. Then he just disappeared. And to summarize what had happened when my family came home, it wasn't my brother, and they were more than convinced it was a prank. There are more details surrounding these more important events and what had transpired between them and my previously written story, but what really matters is that it never really stopped after that. Any time that I was home alone, or at least late at night, he was there. Dressed entirely head to toe in black, so I'd never know his age, race, nothing. There were phone calls that started at some point, but they were only silence or a quick breath. And even though I lived in a house with people, it seemed that it only happened to me. My mom would pick up the silent phone calls, but they or she would hang up quickly and they assumed nothing of it. Then, The next real event happened. I was again home alone. It was a Friday, because I remember my friends were at a school football game that I didn't have a ride for. Around that time, things had kind of slowed down with the man. It seemed like he was coming around and just staring at my house from the backyard far less often. So I was actually feeling pretty relaxed at the time, considering everything. I was watching the TV show House, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a dark, sudden flash. My stomach dropped. My heart was pounding like a drum. Everything went quiet. I had muted the TV and was almost like who blinks first scenario, because whoever or whatever it was making no noise. An eternity had passed in a series of seconds to minutes, until reality came back with the sound of a doorknob. I heard it jingling. From deafening silence to hearing an unexpected sound of the figurative pin dropping, my stress response chose correctly for the first time and I ran. I grabbed my phone, left everything else, and went right out the door. I didn't stop until I reached the other side of town. There, I remembered lying underneath a streetlight, thinking that this was it, the day was all building up to. I had been sleeping with the knife under my pillow, being unbelieved for years at this point, and it all led to this. It was either an attempt or he wasn't done with me yet. He could be coming at any moment, or at his very next opportunity. I took those seconds to try to gather my thoughts, catch my breath, and then I called my mom. She was out at a bar with her boyfriend at the time, so they picked me up and we all went back home. Her boyfriend had made us stay in the car, and the only thing different than how we had left it was that the back door was wide open. It was a complicated antique door, and not easily opened even when it was unlocked. So that should be a huge worry in itself, but of course, they dismissed that too. They said it must have been the cat. Seriously? The most concerning thing for me, though, was that nothing was taken. Most people would naturally first assume it must have been a burglar, but no, nothing was taken. And at the time, was just a basement full of expensive tools and equipment as my mom and her boyfriend would flip houses. And yet, not a single thing was gone. There had been more than enough time to. From my leaving the house to coming back had to be at least 30 minutes or so. Sometime after that event, my neighbor had experienced something too. While sitting on his patio with his girlfriend, a man in all black started approaching them from the yard of an abandoned house. Then he pulled out his gun and said stop, and he didn't. So my neighbor then fired at the ground, and in that moment he must have decided it wasn't worth it because he ran off, tripping over a branch on his way out. That was around the time he stopped coming around. But now, as I previously mentioned, therapy has forced me to face this and try to process it. During the time of these events, naturally, I spent so much time wondering who it could be and why. To kidnap me, kill me, do something unspeakable? But I never got any answers from the world, time, or myself. Until possibly now. My brother's friend, after these events had all transpired and while sleeping in my brother's car, did something horrifying. He set himself up along a levee, at first just himself and a notebook, and would watch people as they walked by. They went along with their day, unsuspecting, as he would make a record of everyone he saw, hair color, what they were wearing, race, gender, age range, how long they were there, how often, with someone or alone. And then one day, with a knife in hand, he pulled a woman off the levee and into a nearby wooded area. She was able to fight him off. She had gotten away, but not unscathed. He slashed her arm, and I can't even imagine the horror that she went through in those moments. Following that, I'm not sure how they found him, or how they even knew about the notebook, but the only known address that they had for him was my brother's and ours. State and local police, as well as I believe possibly the U.S. Marshal, it was a branch of law enforcement I remember being high up and unusual, came to my door in a sudden swarm. They banged on my door, and as I opened it, a cop slammed me against the door with his forearm and told me to stay back. I was absolutely clueless to what had happened, but it started to click when I saw my brother's friend being walked out in handcuffs from my brother's house. They sat him up the stairs, feet away from police canines, and I could hear them asking where his backpack is. A man said, "If you don't tell us where it is, we're going to search both of these houses." I think he sincerely cared about my brother, as my brother had done so much for him all those past years. And so I assume that's why he then divulged that it was under the dining room table at my brother's home. They went in, collected it, and simply left. I don't know what happened to him, but now years later I wonder if everything that had happened to me was because of him. The way he wrote down those people's every moments terrifies me, yet almost solidifies in a way my suspicion. What if the only reason he knew when I was truly home alone, or routes, was because he had a notebook on me, too?
This happened when I was around 19 years old, when I was a freshman in college. During this time, I had gotten a job as a babysitter to keep up with my rent and all of my other additional expenses. Throughout my time as a babysitter, I had babysat many different kids and nothing strange or abnormal has ever happened. There was this one time, however, where I witnessed something I still can't even describe. I was getting paid a few $100 to watch over a couple's child for a few nights who was 2 years old at the time, named Ben. Ben was a lot to take care of and was one of those babies who would always whine over the smallest things. Whether it be trying to carry him or even going to check up on him, he'd always want to be left alone. At around 9 p.m., I went over to Ben's crib to find him fast asleep. The crib was located in the room adjacent to the room I'd be sleeping in, so it would be close enough for me to hear if something was wrong. I also had a baby monitor so I could check up on him once in a while. Fast forward to around 1 a.m., I start drifting off to sleep and slept for about a good hour or so, before waking up to the sound of the baby monitor making this distorted noise. I checked the little tablet and what I saw still terrifies me till this day. Standing in the middle of the floor was Ben looking up at the camera with a blank expression on his face, as if he knew he were being watched. I turned off the tablet and quietly walked into Ben's room, only to find him still fast asleep in his crib. I left the baby monitor turned off and didn't get a minute of sleep that night.
We all make dumb decisions in life, but in this case, I was stupid. Very stupid. I arranged to meet a guy off Tinder, but because of my heightened anxiety about driving, I arranged for him to pick me up outside my place. I have been talking to him for a few weeks at least, but that is not redeemable, and I know that. The choice I made on this day could have ended me, but thankfully, I'm still around to tell the tale. The guy picked me up in his car and told me he planned to take us out for sushi. I love sushi, so I thought great. He put in the name of the restaurant into his GPS and we were off, making pleasant conversation along the way until we were there. Until I started seeing nothing but woods when I looked out my window. I felt very confused. We were supposed to be going in the town, not into the wilderness in the middle of nowhere. Fear hit me hard then. He said, "I swear the GPS is taking me through here. I didn't choose this path." "Please just take us back to civilization," I said. My eyes were wide and I must have looked like a deer in headlights. His face was really apprehensive, so he must have known that I was scared completely shitless. OMG, I thought to myself. I should have just conquered my anxiety about driving and met him somewhere public. Or better yet, not met this guy at all. What the hell was I thinking? I'm going to get murdered here in these woods. I tried checking my phone to see if I could assist him with the GPS, and that's when he said those spine-chilling words. "There's no signal out here." I remember just thinking to myself to try to look calm. Don't let him think you suspect he's onto something. But man, I did feel terrified. The tips of my fingers were cold while I was sweating. If he's going to kill me, part of me wanted him to get it over with so I wouldn't be left in anticipation. His forehead was perspiring. He kept saying, "I swear I'm not doing this. I'm trying to get us back to the route for the sushi place." Then I said, "I don't care about sushi anymore. Get us to a gas station, anywhere with people at this point." Then he said, "I don't have a shovel or a weapon in my trunk or anything if that's what you're thinking," which did little to calm my nerves. We finally reached the restaurant after what felt like an eternity. I'd never been so scared in my life. I didn't have much of an appetite and I was physically trembling when we arrived, but I figured he didn't kill me when he had the chance, so I guess we was safe now to continue with our date. I already planned on taking an Uber home because I didn't want to go through that experience again. I was shocked out of my mind when he then asked, "So when do you think that we'll have some sex?" I nearly choked on a piece of sashimi. What? I didn't know where this was coming from. I didn't know how he could ask me something like this on the first date, when he literally saw me pale as a ghost just moments ago. "You know, like how long you want me to wait for sex? A day? A week? A month?" I stared at him dumbfounded. I couldn't respond because I was utterly speechless in that moment. "Well, I can't wait for a whole month, I'm telling you that now," he said. I didn't say anything, and the rest of the date was insanely awkward. I said goodbye and I took my Uber home, and only seconds after my Uber pulled out of the restaurant parking lot, he texts me saying that he doesn't think it's going to work out with me because he needs a girl with the higher libido. I didn't argue. I just texted him back simply, "Okay," ready to be done with this man. When the Uber driver drove me home, he did not take me through the wilderness pathway of the potential murder site. He took me home through streetlights, other cars, lights, the sweetest scene to my immense relief. I couldn't help but wonder why my date had to take me through an hour drive through the wilderness to get to the restaurant, but it only took the Uber driver 15 minutes to get me home from the same location. The whole thing was chilling. I don't know if my date planned on anything sinister or if it was an honest mistake, but I'm glad I made it out alive. I learned a tough lesson that night, one that I should have already known, but that I foolishly ignored for some reason. Don't let strangers from a dating app pick you up in their cars.